On the Pre-Cuppa High School History Channel, we have a very special interview with a very special lady. She is not only one of ancient Egypt's most famous rulers, but she is also one of the most well-known women in history. She is distinguished for her incredible beauty, her advanced intellect, her cunning political alliances, and her seductive powers. She may have been born in ancient time, but today she is considered the prototype of the modern femme fatale. Ladies and gentlemen, Cleopatra VII. Cleopatra, welcome to the studio. I'm so excited to have this opportunity to ask you a few questions. So what was it like growing up in ancient Egypt? Well, my father was a ruler at the time, Ptolemy VII. And I was named Cleopatra, which means the father-loving goddess. I certainly had a lot of love in my childhood, even though it was hard for my father because our family is Macedonian and we were foreigners ruling Egypt. There was always fighting amongst the people, but I grew up quite protected from that, behind the walls of the Palace of Alexandria. The thing I remember most is my schooling, not just in Greek education, but many scholarly topics, including learning 8 languages: Egyptian, Ethiopian, Hebrew, Arabic, Median, Parthian, Latin, and my native Koine Greek. Wow, that's a lot. When did you first realise you wanted to become a ruler? For as long as I can remember, I always felt ambitious and I wanted to be more than just a clever girl who lived in a palace. I wanted to be a queen. All throughout my childhood, I fought with my brothers about who would be the pharaoh of Egypt. And when my father died in 51 BC, I was only 18 years old, but I knew my time had come, so I took the throne. I only wished I didn't have to rule alongside my brother, Ptolemy XIII. I bet. Was it hard to accept your brother as co-ruler? Yes, because I lived in a time of misogyny and bias, where women constantly had to battle prejudice and weren't really in positions of power. It was very challenging for me because I felt like I didn't belong in a time where it was unlawful for females to rule. I felt I was advanced beyond my years and didn't need a man to co-rule, especially not my brother. He was just a child, 8 years younger than me, and it wasn't fair. Later on, I even had to co-rule with my baby son. In a patriarchal society, I had to use all my powers, my intellect, my beauty, and my charm, to navigate the political world and get the power I deserved. What did you hope to achieve in your reign as queen? The most important thing to me was to maintain Egypt's territory and the Ptolemy dynasty, ensuring that my son would rule as pharaoh when I was gone. The Roman expansion was a big threat at the time, so I tried to do everything I could do to ensure that Egypt did not fall to them. I worked hard to strengthen Egypt's military and turn the economy around, as there was a harsh famine plaguing the country at the time. One of the things I did to achieve this was change our coinage system. I set the value of our bronze coinage instead of it being based on weight. I also knew that to keep Egypt safe from Roman occupation, I needed to align myself with the right people and become involved in Roman politics. I wanted to keep my power and rule over Egypt, and beyond that, I also hoped that I would rule the whole civilized world. Do you think your alliance with Julius Caesar was beneficial? My alliance with Julius Caesar came at a time when I really needed it. My brother had driven me off the throne and I was forced to flee Syria in 50 BC. Meanwhile, Caesar had defeated Pompey in a Roman civil war and Pompey had fled to Egypt. Caesar tracked him down in Egypt and was desperate to kill him, but my brother beat him to it. This angered Caesar and he wanted money from my brother to pay his soldiers. My brother refused, but I knew if I could just manage to meet Caesar, I could ally with him to overthrow my brother for our mutual benefit. I smuggled myself back to the Palace of Alexandria, rolled up in a carpet rug delivered straight to Caesar himself. War ensued in 48 BC and 47 BC, and Caesar's army was able to defeat my brother, who ended up drowning in the Nile while attempting to flee. My son, little Caesar, was born in 47 BC, and I spent 2 years living in Rome, where I learned a lot about Roman politics and met with important senators. I ended up visiting Rome again in 44 BC with my son and my older brother Ptolemy XIV, who I had to marry and co-rule with. But during my stay, Caesar was assassinated. How would you describe your relationship with Mark Antony? I first met Mark Antony during my time in Rome, as he was a general under Julius Caesar. After Caesar was murdered, Antony rose to power in Rome and sent for me to meet him in Tarsus, now known as Turkey. I made another grand entrance, sailing up the Sindus River in a decorated barge with purple sails, in the robes of the Greek goddess Aphrodite. Mark was won over, and we both knew that an alliance between us would be mutually beneficial. He wanted Egyptian support in a war against the Parthians, and I knew another opportunity to achieve power in both Egypt and Rome, and most importantly, stop the Roman expansion from swallowing Egypt and the Ptolemy dynasty. We had a mutual affection for each other that would last the rest of our days, but it was a complex relationship. Mark moved to Alexandria to be with me in 41 BC, and in 40 BC we had twins together. Then he had to marry Octavian's sister as part of a settlement for control over Rome, but in 37 BC we were together again in a mutual alliance for Egyptian support against the Parthian Empire and the return of Egypt's Eastern Empire. In the years that followed, Octavian, who was Julius Caesar's son, became increasingly paranoid that Mark Antony and I were trying to take control over Rome, maybe because we announced our desire to rule the civilized world. And in 31 BC, Octavian declared war. The Battle of Actium ensued off the coast of Greece, and we were defeated and fled back to Egypt. When Octavian arrived in Alexandria in 30 BC, Mark believed I was dead and impaled himself on his sword. It was a grueling end to our relationship that ultimately also resulted in the end of me as well. At least death by a viper is a fitting way to go, as this reptile is a symbol of divine royalty. Oh wow, it takes a strong person to do that. What do you see as your greatest strength? I believe that my greatest strength is my intelligence and my cunning. I know who to ally with and when, so I get whatever I want, when I want. I'm also very knowledgeable about medicine, science, cosmetics, chemistry, particularly poison, which has sure come in handy. I wrote treatises on topics such as cosmetics, coinage, chemistry, and gynecology, which is a legacy I'm proud to leave behind. You should be. And what was your greatest challenge in your 21 years of reign? The greatest challenge I faced was being a woman in ancient civilization. As I said before, I lived in a time of misogyny and bias, so I found it hard to rise to power without flaw. I was forced to use my beauty and intellect to my advantage, to get what I want and what Egypt needed. It was also difficult to acquire the knowledge needed and establish political networks when you're considered an inferior ruler to a 3-year-old boy. But I faced this challenge well. I made good alliances and manipulated people to get positions of power. However, understanding the depth and complexity of Roman politics and games was difficult for even a person like me, which was probably my undoing in the end. If you could change anything about your life, what would it be? I would probably give myself more time for me and my personal hobbies, instead of all my time being dedicated to Roman politics, keeping Egypt independent and trying to rule the civil world. Apart from learning and studying art, language, science and astronomy, I used to love inventing hairstyles like the chignon, and I wrote literary work on cosmetics, and I loved fashion items such as pearl-encrusted dresses and snake bracelets. I would have loved to do more of that. I also feel I didn't spend enough time with my favourite spoons. Oh, she's cute. And last question. Do you have any wise words of wisdom for the young girls out there today? For the young girls out there, follow your dreams. You can achieve anything. Fight against the system, even though it may be hard. You have lots of skills and ways to succeed. Use them all. Your brain, your charm, your looks, your cunning, and your talent. You will get what you want, defeat your enemies, and gain power and fame. Thank you, Cleopatra. What an incredible interview with an incredible woman. Cleopatra has certainly earned her fame as one of the most significant and influential rulers of not only the ancient world, but of all time. Take heed, all you young ones out there, because everybody wants to rule the world. Listen to Cleopatra's wise words, and maybe one day you will.